Digital Personal Data Protection Bill that has already been tabled by the central government in the parliament, in the Lok Sabha. Start off this conversation, joining me on the telecast is Jaijit Bhattacharya. Now, Jaijit, how does this data protection bill, the Digital Personal Data Protection Bill, get differentiated from the past bills that have been made? There have been a lot of changes and amendments that have happened over the past months and years, and finally a bill that is likely to be passed in the Rajya Sabha as well. And what distinguishes it from the previous ones that have been brought about?
I think for that one needs to understand the challenges of creating this bill itself. So one has to balance privacy and surveillance in order to have security in the country. There is certain level of surveillance that the government has to be permitted with. Now, the bill should not be in a way that the government itself is excluded from being able to do legal surveillance. Then the whole issue of data localization, there was pushback from a geopolitical perspective on data localization, and therefore that aspect had to be fine-tuned. The whole issue of privacy for children. There is no doubt that we need to make sure that their data is secure. But if somebody logs in and says, I'm over 18, when they're not, or they're using their parents' login, then how do you figure out that whether they're a child or they're not? And therefore, suddenly you're slapped with a fine of, let's say, 250 crores. So how do you ensure some of these things? Then the compliance burden that was there for businesses, although even the previous version was very lucidly written, just like the current version that we are seeing. But the compliance burden was a major issue. Then the issue of cross-border data transfer, which has been a big point of discussion. It had to be aligned to what is acceptable globally while protecting the interests of our citizens. So just like GDPR, which is a European law, is trans-border in nature. So even if a European citizen is in India, his or her data will have the same kind of protection as they will have in Europe.
Right.
So it's transnational in nature.
Okay, Jaijit, again coming back to you, and an aspect that has been raised very pertinently by Advocate Jain was the fact that there is this data piracy that takes place, and also cyber terrorism that is very rampant. Now, these issues have been raised on the domestic front, but also on international fora by world economies, including India. Now, how important and integral does it become, and how it's a matter of acting swiftly on these issues that are concerning our security, our sovereignty, because tomorrow when we have these this grid failure that took place in Mumbai, or for that matter, there have been a number of these cyber threats that have been looming large in various parts of our country. Or when there were examples of 2 or 3 times there has been data breach that has taken place of the AIIMS hospitals. The computers are completely shut down, and there has been data breach that has been witnessed over there. The computers malfunctioning and the systems malfunctioning. Taking a look, this is a criminal offence. How integral does the data protection bill become to be the first interface for our agencies and our security forces to then be able to nab down on these culprits by tracking these trails that have been left behind them? Please unmute yourself, Judge.
Yeah. Since the time I did my PhD in privacy from IIT Delhi about 2 decades back, I've been trying to explain the difference between privacy and security. This act is about privacy, which is that your personally identifiable information should be protected. You as an individual needs to be protected. When it comes to cyber security per se, it's about security of the data overall. And there are enough regulations already in place, which enables the enforcement agencies to take action on that. Now, within that, if the breaches happen because of callousness of large organizations with turnovers of 30,000 crore, 40,000 crore, then there are stiff penalties that are provisioned as part of this particular bill. So what it does is it provides the legislative basis and the regulations for the enforcement agencies to go after large corporations who are callous towards the data of individuals of this country, and that's where this bill will be coming in. But if there are, let's say, forces outside of India who are breaking into the Indian servers and just stealing data, now you can steal data but not violate any privacy, and the other way around also, you can have privacy violation without any cybersecurity breach, because they are two completely different things. I can take data from my own system, which has your data in it, and I can take your data and distribute it. That's a privacy violation, and this bill stops that. But there is no security violation that happened because I did it to my own system, and similarly the other way around. What this bill is very sharply focused on is protecting the data of our citizens. Now, unfortunately, there is a leeway given saying that this is only for digital online data. And therefore, if I take your data offline and then the privacy breach happens, I'm not sure whether this bill is able to cover that or not.
Okay.
We'll keenly have to wait for the rules to be drafted against this bill after the bill is adopted to be able to understand what the actual implication will be. But it's a great first step towards providing the regulatory basis for the enforcement agencies to go after privacy violation and to clearly recognize privacy violation as a criminal act, besides what we already had, which was...
So then Jayajit, if you could give us examples of in which ways data gets violated or there's breach of data in the day-to-day lives that we live in, whether, particularly on the social media or whenever we are online.
It's as simple as that. You go for a tooth filling, and if the dentist asks you what's your father's name and mother's name, it's a privacy violation because my tooth filling has got nothing to do with my father's name and mother's name, right? So one, collection of data which is not relevant. Second, I give you my credit card details to pay for it, right? And then you keep it for future purposes, quote unquote. Now there is no reason why you can keep it for future purposes without taking my consent. So the moment the transaction gets completed, that whole data should be deleted immediately. Third, there actually, I can go on and on the various privacy violations that can happen. So anytime that you take my data, either without my consent or without my informed consent, because you can ask me to do click on certain site without me knowing what that means. And behind that is a 30-page agreement, which I'm supposed to sign by doing the click-wrap agreement.
Right.
That is not acceptable. You need to teach me why you're taking this particular data from me, and you should never ever take data from me which is not relevant to the transaction that we're doing.
Okay.
So my father's name, mother's name, and so on and so forth, if it's irrelevant, you cannot be taking it. I've also seen certain embassies asking for Aadhaar number. That is a privacy violation. They cannot be asking for Aadhaar number when they're giving visas to us. So there is privacy violation at multiple levels that's happening in our country. And this particular bill is a wake-up moment for those who are not aware of how privacy violation is happening. And it's not just about not feeling good about it. It's about actually destroying people, because I can use the data to financially harm you. I can also use the data to go online and then create certain incorrect comments about you or distort you based on the data that I collect.
Okay.
So one of the things that I tell my students is that you are not what your CV says, but what your social media profile says.
Okay.
And therefore, privacy of your data becomes extremely critical.
Okay. All right. Jayajit, again, understanding from you now in this situation, how is it a violation of the right to privacy? What are the loopholes that let the central government take control of the citizens' data?
So I think the bill is what it says. It's a digital privacy bill. It's a digital data privacy bill. So I think the loophole essentially is that if your data is not digital and then there is a privacy violation, then this bill does not cover it. So if I take your data in a form, which is typically what happens, you are, in a movie theater, somebody says, you fill up this form and you will be eligible for a lottery. And that entire data is then given to telemarketers. So that's clearly is a violation of your privacy, but this bill does not cover it. So and also, as I said, if you take my data offline and still in a digital format, this data, this bill does not cover it. So yes, this bill, misses out on some of the aspects of privacy. So it's not really a complete privacy bill. It's only a digital data privacy bill. And I think we would need to back it up with a full privacy bill at some point in time. But as Sumitra mentioned, and as was mentioned by the other panelists, it's a great step forward. We can always build on top of it. And this entire country has been waiting, at least the industry has been waiting for quite some time for a bill to come in, because it has got multiple implications. It has got implications on transborder contracts, because some of those transborder contracts cannot hold
Okay.
in the absence of a privacy act being there.